A little girl vanished from a sleepover in 1995. No witnesses, no evidence. Just gone. But 11 years later, an old toy phone hidden in an attic revealed a recording that would blow the case wide open. What was on that tape? And how did it lead to one of the most shocking discoveries in true crime history? Stay tuned. It was a warm Saturday evening in the summer of 1995 when 6-year-old Emily Carter, an energetic, bright-eyed little girl with curly auburn hair, was invited to her first-ever sleepover. The invitation had come from her best friend, Olivia Pierce, whose family lived just a few blocks away from Emily's home in the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Maplewood Heights, Seattle. Emily's mother, Margaret Carter, was hesitant at first. Emily was a shy child, sensitive, sometimes prone to nightmares, but after much pleading and reassurances from Olivia's parents, Margaret agreed. She packed Emily's small pink overnight bag with pajamas, her favorite stuffed bunny, and a storybook. Emily could barely contain her excitement as Margaret walked her over to Olivia's house just after dinner. That night was everything two little girls could hope for. The girls built pillow forts in the living room. They giggled while painting each other's nails with glitter polish. They munched on bowls of buttered popcorn while watching The Lion King on VHS. Olivia's mother, Linda Pierce, occasionally peeked in on them with a smile, pleased to see them having so much fun. By 10:30 p.m., after a flurry of giggles and whispered secrets, the girls settled into their sleeping bags laid out on the thick carpet of the living room floor. Linda turned off the TV, dimmed the lights, and kissed them both goodnight. The house was calm. Olivia's father, Tom Pierce, had already gone to bed upstairs. All doors and windows were locked. A gentle summer rain began to fall, pattering softly against the windows. At some point in the night, everything changed. When Linda came downstairs the next morning around 7 a.m., she found Olivia still asleep in her sleeping bag. But Emily was gone. At first, Linda assumed Emily had gotten up early, perhaps gone to the bathroom or wandered into another room. But after a quick search of the house, kitchen, bathroom, spare rooms, panic began to creep in. Margaret Carter was called immediately. Within 20 minutes, Margaret arrived, frantic, calling for her daughter through the house, her voice growing more strained with each unanswered call. The more they searched, the stranger the situation became. Emily's small pink sneakers were still neatly placed by the front door. Her stuffed bunny was still inside her sleeping bag. Her overnight bag remained untouched in the corner. The front and back doors were both locked, bolted from the inside. All the windows were secure. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no disturbed furniture. It was as if the little girl had simply vanished into thin air. Police arrived quickly and began canvassing the home and surrounding area. Neighbors were questioned. Olivia, confused and teary-eyed, told detectives that she hadn't heard or seen anything unusual in the night. No footsteps, no strange voices, no loud sounds. Word spread rapidly through the neighborhood. Flyers with Emily's picture were posted on telephone poles and in shop windows. Hundreds of volunteers scoured the nearby parks and wooded areas. Door-to-door searches were conducted. Local news stations ran tearful interviews with Emily's parents. Helicopters hovered overhead, scanning the dense greenbelt behind the Pierce home. Weeks passed by. Despite a massive search effort and mounting media attention, no trace of little Emily was ever found. Speculation swirled. Some believed Emily had been abducted by a stranger in the dead of night. Others suspected someone close to the family. Some thought she might have wandered off and met with tragedy in the nearby woods. But with no evidence, no witnesses, and no leads, the investigation stalled. Eventually, as the headlines faded, so too did the public's interest. The case grew cold. Emily's parents were left to face an agonizing void, their daughter's bedroom frozen in time, her toys gathering dust. Another missing child lost to time, one more unanswered mystery in the dark corners of Seattle's history. By the spring of 2006, more than a decade had passed since Emily's disappearance. The Pierce family had since moved on with their lives, or tried to. Olivia was now 17 and preparing to leave for college. The old house in Maplewood Heights, once filled with childhood memories, had grown too large and too heavy with unspoken sadness. The Pierces decided to finally put it on the market. It was a bittersweet process. For weeks, Linda Pierce spent her afternoons boxing up forgotten belongings, scrubbing floors, and dusting shelves. Though time had dulled the raw edge of that long-ago tragedy, it lingered unspoken in the corners of the house. One gray, rainy afternoon, Linda climbed up into the attic to tackle the last of the storage. The air was thick with dust. Old Christmas decorations, broken lamps, and stacks of cardboard boxes filled the dim space. Near the far wall, behind a stack of old suitcases, she spotted a small canvas tote bag. Faded, but still legible, the stitched label read, "Memories." Curious, Linda pulled it out and opened it on the attic floor. Inside were forgotten pieces of Olivia's childhood. A scuffed teddy bear, a stack of coloring books, 2 well-loved dolls, and a bright red rotary toy phone. The sight of it stopped Linda cold. The phone had been one of Olivia and Emily's favorite toys, a sturdy, old-fashioned plastic replica that once belonged to Olivia's grandmother. The girls had spent hours pretending to call fairy tale characters and imaginary friends on it the night Emily vanished. Linda picked up the toy phone, turning it in her hands. It felt oddly heavier than she remembered. A strange chill prickled the back of her neck. Instinctively, she unscrewed the small back panel, revealing an unexpected compartment. Inside, nestled tightly, was a microcassette recorder. Linda's hands trembled as she removed the recorder and dusted it off. An old cassette was still inside, the tape wound tight. Had it somehow recorded something that night? Some sound, some clue that had been missed? Her heart pounding, Linda rushed downstairs and dug out an old tape player from the garage. She popped in the cassette, her fingers shaking as she pressed play. The old tape player whirred to life. For a few seconds, there was only crackling static, broken by faint hisses and clicks. Linda leaned in closer, heart racing. Then, cutting through the static, came the soft, unmistakable voice of a child. Is this how it works? A pause. The faint sound of shallow breathing. The voice trembled, small and unsure. Can anyone hear me? Mommy? Daddy? I want to go home. Please come get me. Linda's breath caught in her throat. There was no mistaking that voice, even after all these years. It was Emily. Before Linda could fully process what she was hearing, another voice emerged on the tape. This one low, calm, eerily composed. A man's voice. Someone she didn't recognize. Be quiet, Emily. We don't want anyone to know about our special room. A chilling pause. You could hear the faint hum of an appliance in the background. A refrigerator? A heater? The voice continued, tone colder now. Remember what we talked about. No more phone calls. Unless I say so. A sharp click. Then silence. The tape continued to spin, but there was nothing more. Linda sat frozen, hands clamped over her mouth, the weight of what she had just heard sinking in. After 11 years of heartbreak and unanswered questions, here, hidden in an old toy, was proof that Emily had still been alive, trapped, and not far from where it all began. Linda wasted no time. The moment the chilling tape finished playing, she called Detective Mark Raines, one of the original investigators on Emily's case. a man who had spent years haunted by the unsolved disappearance. Within hours, the microcassette recorder and tape were secured as evidence. The Seattle PD's cold case unit, which had grown more sophisticated in the decades since the initial investigation, reopened Emily's file. Voice analysis experts were brought in to enhance the recording. They isolated the male voice on the tape, comparing it to interviews and records from the 1995 investigation. The match didn't come from Tom or Linda Pierce, or anyone in the immediate family. But then, an unexpected name surfaced. Frank Delaney, Olivia's uncle, who had been living in the Pierce's basement apartment during the summer of 1995. Frank had not been a primary suspect at the time. A quiet, unassuming man in his 40s, Frank worked irregular jobs as a handyman and spent much of his time alone. He had an alibi, or so it seemed, the night Emily vanished. No evidence had ever pointed in his direction, and he had moved out shortly after the tragedy. However, Frank had passed away suddenly in 2001 of a heart attack, and now, with modern forensic tools, new questions were being asked. Detectives pulled old files and property records. They found that Frank had done extensive renovations to the Pierce home's basement in the early 90s, including building a false wall near the back storage room. It had been dismissed at the time as just an old handyman's project. Now, they weren't so sure. Armed with this new suspicion, police obtained a warrant and brought in a ground-penetrating radar (GPR) team to examine the property from top to bottom. What they found was chilling. Beneath layers of drywall and concrete, behind what appeared to be an ordinary basement wall, the radar picked up a void, a space where no room should exist. Demolition experts carefully removed the section of wall. Dust filled the air as a long-hidden doorway was revealed, sealed from the inside with old boards and bolts. Behind it lay a narrow set of stairs leading down to an underground chamber, no more than 10 feet by 10 feet, its air stale and cold from years of abandonment. What the investigators found inside stopped them cold. Against one wall sat a small metal cot, the thin mattress stained and decaying. Scattered across the floor were worn children's books, coloring pages, a cracked plastic tea set, and old wrappers from long-expired snacks. And mounted on the far wall, its once bright paint faded to dull pink, was the original red rotary toy phone. Only it wasn't just a toy. The receiver was wired to an old internal phone line that snaked through the basement ceiling. It had allowed anyone in the hidden room to place calls or desperate recorded messages without alerting the rest of the house. Forensics teams swept the chamber. DNA traces consistent with Emily Carter were found on the bedding and objects inside. Even though the space had been long abandoned, the evidence made it clear. Emily had been kept there, imprisoned just feet beneath where Olivia and her family had slept. The gruesome truth was coming into focus. With the hidden chamber beneath the Pierce home exposed, police began piecing together the grim puzzle of what had happened to Emily. Detectives combed through old permits, receipts, and property records tied to Frank Delaney. It became clear that Frank had been an obsessive, deeply disturbed man who had carefully constructed the underground room himself, pouring concrete, reinforcing the walls with soundproof insulation, even running a ventilation duct to mask the space from detection. Interviews with old acquaintances revealed disturbing details. Frank had always been reclusive, often retreating to the basement for hours on end. Though polite on the surface, there had always been rumors, strange behaviors, unexplained absences, an unhealthy fixation on children's toys and media. But one mystery remained. Why had the chamber appeared abandoned? Why had there been no sign of Emily's presence in recent years? Investigators pored through the timeline. The tape recording suggested that, at least in the early days, Emily had been alive in that space. Frightened, confused, reaching out for her parents. Something must have happened that forced Frank to move her. They dug deeper. Archived police reports revealed that in late August 1995, just weeks after Emily disappeared, neighbors had reported suspicious noises coming from the Pierce property at odd hours. Muffled banging, faint crying. One neighbor even contacted the police, but a routine visit by patrol officers had found nothing out of place. It was likely that this scare spooked Frank into relocating Emily. Detectives began a massive search of Frank's former residences, storage units, and properties. The task was enormous. Frank had lived a transient lifestyle after leaving the Pierce's home, renting small cabins, storage garages, and trailers throughout the Pacific Northwest. Weeks stretched into months. Then a breakthrough. In an old storage rental agreement, they found a paper trail leading to an abandoned hunting cabin deep in the Cascade Mountains, roughly 80 miles northeast of Seattle. The property had once belonged to a distant cousin of Frank's, but had been signed over to him in 1996. A SWAT team and forensic unit descended on the remote cabin at dawn. The place looked derelict, overgrown with vines, roof sagging, windows boarded shut. But the basement door showed signs of frequent use. Inside, officers found another hidden chamber, this one larger but crudely built, lined with old blankets and battered furniture. And there, sitting on a tattered blanket, pale and thin, was Emily Carter, 17 years old now, her hair long and unkempt, her skin pale from years out of sunlight. Her eyes wide with shock and confusion as police gently approached. She was alive. Barely able to speak at first, Emily clung to a tattered stuffed bunny, the same one her mother had packed for her all those years ago. She had spent more than a decade in captivity, cut off from the world, fed lies and manipulations. Investigators learned that Frank had convinced her parents had abandoned her, that the world outside was dangerous, that only he could protect her. She had never been allowed outdoors, never attended school, never seen television or read books beyond those he permitted. Her sense of time was fractured. For her, the nightmare had no clear beginning or end. The rescue of Emily Carter stunned the nation. News outlets across the country ran headlines. Missing girl found alive after 11 years. Seattle's lost child rescued from mountain cabin. How a forgotten toy phone cracked a cold case. But behind the media frenzy was a far more fragile reality. Emily had endured over a decade of isolation and manipulation. From the age of 6, she had been told repeatedly that her parents didn't want her, that they had given her away. Frank had filled her young mind with terrifying lies, that the world outside had been ravaged by disease or war, that anyone who tried to find her would harm her. Over time, her trust in reality had been broken. Her captor's voice, once soft and coaxing, then harsh and threatening, had become the center of her world. He controlled when she ate, what she wore, when she could sleep, even what memories she was allowed to hold on to. And yet, through it all, there had been one small thread of hope: the red rotary phone. Unknown to Frank, young Emily had discovered that the toy phone, wired to an old internal line, had a recording function. It had become her secret. In whispered moments when Frank was away or asleep, she had used it to speak into the void, to her parents, to the world beyond the walls. "Mommy, Daddy, please find me." That tiny act of resistance, a child's desperate belief that someone, somewhere, might still be listening, had been preserved inside the cassette recorder. Forgotten in an attic for over a decade, it was that single recording that ultimately saved her life. In the weeks following her rescue, Emily was placed under the care of trauma specialists and reunited, carefully and slowly, with her parents. The first meeting was raw with emotion. Margaret and David Carter weeping openly, their daughter frail but alive in their arms. The road to healing would be long. Emily faced immense challenges: rebuilding her sense of trust, learning basic life skills, understanding a world that had passed her by while she remained trapped in a nightmare. She struggled with night terrors, moments of overwhelming confusion, and a deep fear of strangers. But there were glimmers of hope. Her love of drawing, which had helped her survive in captivity, began to flourish in therapy. She remembered favorite lullabies her mother once sang. And, over time, with gentle support, she began to rediscover the truth that her parents had never stopped looking for her, that she had always been loved. Today, Emily's story stands as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can hide behind ordinary walls, and of the astonishing resilience of the human spirit. A forgotten toy phone, a child's voice recorded in secret, and a mother's determination to face old memories had done what years of investigation could not. They brought Emily home. In the months following her rescue, Emily Carter was placed under the care of a specialized trauma recovery team. Doctors, psychologists, and counselors worked tirelessly to help her begin piecing her life back together, a life that had been stolen from her for over a decade. Her journey toward healing has been slow but steady. At first, Emily could barely speak to strangers. The outside world was overwhelming. The colors too bright, the sounds too loud, everyday technologies foreign and frightening after years in isolation. Even walking outside beneath an open sky brought waves of panic. But day by day, with patient guidance, she began to take her first steps forward. Reuniting with her family was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Margaret and David Carter, who had spent 11 years living with the ache of not knowing, held their daughter for the first time since she was 6 years old. But the gap between past and present was enormous. Emily had grown up in darkness, taught to distrust the very people who loved her most. Building that trust again would take time. Today, Emily is still undergoing intensive therapy. She attends both individual and family counseling. Through art therapy, she's slowly expressing memories too painful to speak aloud. She's learning to navigate a world that moved on without her. Learning how to read, write, use a phone, trust other people, and dream about a future. Her story, of unimaginable horror, survival against impossible odds, and the accidental unearthing of long-buried truth through a forgotten toy phone, has become a chilling reminder that sometimes the past is never truly buried. Sometimes it's simply waiting to be heard.